We are on the air with David Kniffin, the UCI men's coach, who in Irvine this year learned that it's a lot easier to coach a healthy team than a beat-up team. Man, you earned your money this season, didn't you?
Yeah, I think one of my comments earlier to some of our fans and supporters around the program is you got to be careful what you pray for when you're asking for a season full of adversity, because if you're not too specific, you might get something else.
Yeah, why don't you just leave that to scheduling next time? But speaking of scheduling, there are 6 teams left. They start Tuesday, and you played 5 of them. And I wanted to get your thoughts about the matches starting with Tuesday with, well, I know you don't know anything specifically about Erskine because you didn't play them, but you certainly know a lot about Long Beach State. And the winner of that match gets BYU. Talk about be careful about what you wish for. But what are your thoughts about Long Beach State right now?
I'm a big fan of all the teams in the tournament. You know, even not knowing a whole lot about Erskine, it's I think we've got a pretty diverse field with a lot of different styles of volleyball. So, you know, specific to Long Beach State, I love what that program has become in terms of, you know, how they're playing the game. I love they've got a combination of some youth on the court anchored by, I think, a senior in the middle that just gives them some maturity out there, and you know, obviously a well-coached team.
BYU is obviously so tough at home. The winner of that match gets BYU. In a place like Penn State, which will be at the very best a neutral court, does the altitude and what we presume will be a relatively small crowd too, what effect do you think that might have on Penn State, whoever plays them?
You know, I haven't noticed that altitude has played a huge role in BYU's successes or even their challenges this year as maybe we would talk about in years past. I mean, that team is just so disciplined in terms of what they're doing. You watch them play the game from warm-ups through the end of it, and this is one of the most steady BYU teams that I've seen. You know, you can talk about volatility once in a while from a position or two from the service line, but overall, this is one of the more disciplined and steady BYU teams. So I don't imagine that altitude will play in like it has maybe for teams in the past.
Yeah, or the lack thereof. Now,
right.
You know, on the other side, George Mason and Ohio State, man, what a tough first rounder to play in. You joked before about be careful what you wish for. Jay Hossack, the first-year coach at George Mason, his early season schedule was just brutal, and that included a loss to you. That was a long time ago. That team's come around, and then Ohio State, at times this year, I guess was the hottest team in the country.
Yeah, it was really fun to compete against Ohio State at the Long Beach tournament this year. That's a really neat deal they've got going on where they bring in a team from the Midwest, and we're able to bring in actually 2 teams from the Midwest this year. So it was Lewis and Ohio State. And, you know, it's the one time that you really get to live scout is when you have a tournament. Most of the time we're just watching volleyball through video. And there's a feel around that Ohio State team. I think there's a lot of belief, and it looks like just a lot of effort that's being put forth by everyone on that staff and that team. I mean, that's a team that believes they can go through and win it. And I think they absolutely can. From a George Mason standpoint, you know, that team was identified by the Bruins early in the year when I think John was talking about George Mason saying, you know, this is a good team and we got them early. And that's a team that's absolutely matured through the year and adjusted to Jay's coaching style. And that's another team that's full of belief going in this tournament. You know, no one's telling Jay, and at least he's not hearing that, you know, their work is done. For him, he's got his sights set even further down the road.
You mentioned John, of course, he's John Sproul, the coach at UCLA. The winner gets UCLA, which at times also is a fabulous team. Thoughts about them?
I am so impressed with a couple specific guys on the UCLA team, but as a whole, I think what you see is they've got a few pieces that they can interchange. Some guys that are able to step in off the bench, which gives them some nice depth. They haven't used it a lot lately, but you know they can. And you know that John's not afraid to make those changes in a playoff run. So the fact they've got a little more maybe depth and versatility than the other teams in the field, I think could serve them well. And in terms of what they can do from the service line, you know, they've developed an identity in the league as one of the toughest serving teams in the country, and they're going to go for it. So obviously, if they can execute on the skills they have, I think that becomes a team that causes anybody problems, even when maybe they are a little smaller in some positions, just by being able to get teams out of system and play that that defense behind the block with some really good volleyball players. They'll be able to turn rallies and I think score in transition as well as anyone in the field this year.
You know, I think we both know from a season where there's been a lot of ups and downs, and gosh knows how many teams were ranked number one at some point, including I think everybody from in the field of the 4 teams, Long Beach, BYU, Ohio State, and UCLA were all ranked number one at one time or another. Nonetheless, would you care to make a prediction or two?
You know, I can't get involved in the predictions of who I think is going to win. I don't want it to come across as favoritism, but I just hope that we have great volleyball, and I hope that we have good attendance. You know, this is our 3rd year now going into the field of 6, and I believe that it's a great thing for the sport. I would love to see this grow to 8 teams. I would love to be able to, you know, have a true quarterfinal, semifinal, and final for the tournament. And so I hope that people, if they aren't able to get to the matches, are able to tune in and watch and chirp to anyone who will listen that, you know, this growth we're experiencing is a real positive thing for men's volleyball. And if we could keep going down that path, I think it gets even better.